Hello everybody and welcome to the ninth Sponge Chat. My name is Jim, I'm the blogger and Sponge OT, and thank you very much for tuning in. These Sponge Chats have been massively successful so far, so thank you very much for all of your comments and your thoughts. They're very well received, I can assure you. This Sponge Chat we have a very special guest, Thom Kiddle, the Director of NILE, as well as a board member of many other important organizations, such as Aqueduto. He came on and we got to speak about basically his journey from teacher into trainer into his journey through language assessment and then eventually to the Director of NILE. And we looked at a number of things, for example, what makes a good teacher trainer, and some of the differences maybe between training teachers and training trainers. And some of the things that really stood out, he went into great detail about some of the needs that, as trainers, we can't be trainers for everything. Rather, perhaps as we move up within the training world, we need to maybe specialize in certain areas. And so it was really, really interesting to get his perspective on this. We looked at also some advice for teachers looking to move into teacher training, and of course some book recommendations. So take a look, please let us know what you think. I'm really, really interested in hearing your thoughts, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one. All right guys, bye. Hi Tom, how you doing?
Good morning, Jim. Greetings from Norwich. How are you doing?
I'm good, thanks. I'm in sunny, well, today it's sunny, Zaragoza, in the north of Spain. I imagine, is it still cold in the UK?
Yeah, we had our summer about a week ago, and that was lovely. And now we've returned to grey winds and rain, and yeah, certainly hoping it comes back again before we write it off completely.
Right, standard UK weather.
Absolutely.
Yeah, very interesting. Well, thank you very much for being here this morning. That's the first thing I need to say. The second thing is perhaps I can talk about the purpose of Sponge Chats, and then we'll get into the questions. Sponge Chats this idea came to me after receiving a number of emails from teachers asking, how do you move into teacher training? And so one of the purposes is to give teachers an idea of options that they can take for certain career paths within AOT. So I'm talking with teacher trainers, but also academic managers and materials writers. So I'd like to provide teachers with because I think the path is very different for everyone that I've spoken to. Everyone kind of goes a little bit all over the place to get to, being a trainer or being a materials writer or an academic manager. And so that's one purpose. The other purpose is hopefully by encouraging or giving teachers information, we encourage teachers to stay within the industry and help with retention and see that, yes, teaching is the main thing within our industry, but there are other paths that we can do to, stay in the industry when we want to advance. Because I feel like maybe we lose too many teachers to mainstream education or lose them completely. So without further ado, let's get to you. Perhaps my first question is, and for everyone listening, who is Thom? Who is Thom Kiddle?
Well, personally, I'm a UK resident with two children living in Norwich, with a passion for vintage Vespa scooters and
Wow.
under 9 and under 11s football. One of the silver linings of the pandemic for me has been the chance to travel less and to actually spend more time at the side of the football pitch, coaching and supporting my boys in their football. So that's at the personal side. And professionally, my day role is as Director of NILE, which is the Norwich Institute for Language Education, a specialised teacher development organisation, and very much concur with what you've said about progression within our field. Many of our courses are based around this idea of career specialisation, so making the move from being a teacher to to our academic manager, to being a testing and assessment specialist, to being a teacher trainer, to being a materials writer. All of these things I think are very much part of the pathway. And although I think it's very important not to leave the classroom too soon. We have a lot to give to language education in terms of our own continuing professional development. I think it's good to specialize and to focus in one area, because we can't be masters of everything in a field that's so diverse and so beautifully diverse in terms of contexts and types of teaching and types of training. Yeah,
completely agree. I mean, NILE is, if not the most famous, but one of the most famous training institutions in the world. It's certainly one of those. For me, my dream is to complete the MA program that you have there. One day in the future, we'll get there.
Absolutely. Yes, very much our flagship program is the master's program, and it's a fantastic place to work, and it is really a great collegial atmosphere. And I work with teacher trainers from around the world, many nationalities, many first languages, many areas of specialization. One thing that really terrifies me is when a new teacher trainer comes to NILE and says, well, yeah, I could pretty much do any one of your courses in terms of leading it as a trainer. I think, well, you really need to have more confidence in a specialism than that, because we run such diverse programs, from teaching English in pre-primary education to teaching English for academic purposes. And I don't think anybody should be a complete generalist in the level of teacher training.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I suppose the more that I work as a teacher and a teacher trainer, the more I realize that there's just so much to know. And like you said, you can't be an expert in everything. And I think that's one of the really good things about having such an online environment, or many communities of practice available online, because you can speak with experts in certain fields, which I think has been very, very important for the pandemic. Like for online teaching, I mean, I had to speak to people to really understand how to make this move effective.
Yeah, and it's a massively challenging move, and I think we've seen the emergency response and teachers responding innovatively and resiliently and creatively to this, taking their traditional approach to teaching and learning into an online space. And we were certainly part of that with a course that we designed. We offered free and was taken up by thousands and thousands of teachers, which was take your teaching online. But it was very much, how do we do this? How do we transition overnight? And now we're perhaps in that opportunity to say, well, in the rebuilding process, in the defining of what our educational setting and systems are going to be, how are we empowered to keep some of those opportunities and affordances of online learning and online training? What are the good things we want to hold on to? And there are many. And yeah, before we get too sidetracked, Jim, I'd just like to mention a couple of other things that I do in a volunteer sense, because I think they're very much part of who I am as well. And so I'm also chair of the Board of Trustees of Equals, the International Quality Assurance and Accreditation Association. That's been a long involvement, and I became chair earlier this year. And also the founding director of or one of the founding directors of Aqueduto, which is the Association for Quality Education and Training Online, which arose from conversations at NILE with Gavin Dudney and Steve Brent from International House London, saying, well, where is the quality assurance for online teacher education? If it's not done by peers, it's going to be imposed on us at some point. And so that was very much a labor of love over the last 5 or 6 years, and gaining traction and producing really interesting research now. And I'm also part of the ITEFL community through the Testing, Evaluation and Assessment Special Interest Group, where I'm the webmaster. So lots of things on the volunteer side, which I think enable me to give back a bit, as well as the day role, which keeps me in a house and home.
Brilliant. Yeah, you've got your hands everywhere, and I think that's excellent. I was actually having a look at Aqueduto site yesterday, something that I wasn't actually aware of, but it's actually really interesting. It provides you with a list of courses and that I imagine has been, I don't know if vetted's the right word, but looked over by a team, I imagine. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, it's a peer-generated volunteer-led quality assurance association, but we spent a lot of time defining what we envisaged as quality and its operationalization in online language teacher education, and then developed an inspection framework. And all of the accredited members have been inspected by a pair of inspectors according to the framework, and given that accreditation based on their own provision of courses. So yeah, very robust system, but also it's very much outward facing as well. The whole framework is available to anyone. The research that we produce is available to anyone, and we really want to make that distinction between quality online teacher education, something you can trust much as you would the reputable providers of teacher education in a face-to-face setting. How can we allow that distinction to be made? Those people who take quality seriously in their systems, processes, course design, course delivery, tutoring, that's all really important as well, not to be overlooked just because we can do things online and we can do them much more simply.
Yeah.
In terms of setting up a physical language school or a physical teacher training institute, and homestay accommodation and social program and safeguarding is an enormous process. And it seems much easier to say, well, I could just have a virtual learning environment and run my own teacher training courses. Yeah. And yes, you could, but where does the quality lie, and who can accredit that? I think was really the genesis of this organization.
Wow, that's it seems almost vital now with how high the importance of online teacher education is now. I would say most teachers, okay, not most teachers, but certainly a large majority of teachers that are looking for development now, they're looking for distance learning. So that's really interesting.
Yeah, absolutely, Jim. And I think, we have got this genie out of the bottle moment where the exposure to the affordances of online learning generally and online teacher education specifically are they're much greater. People have an expectation, I hope, that's been created of their own experiences and their learners' experience of what feels good, has impact, produces outcomes in the online space, just as we've kind of developed over 100 years of classroom-based language education and language teacher training.
Brilliant. That's super interesting. Definitely going to leave some links to teachers as well in the YouTube video and on the blog post. So I'll make sure to leave links and leave explanations there. Perhaps I'd like to look at your journey though. So there are two things I'd like to look at. Is one, your journey from, I imagine you started off as teaching and then into teacher training, and then from teacher training to training of trainers. It's quite a distinct, I think there's a distinct difference there, right? So maybe if we can start from the start. How did you move from teaching into training, and what are some of the challenges that you faced with that transition?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, as I said, I work with hundreds of teacher trainers, and I think everybody's journey is different. Everybody's move from being a classroom teacher and hopefully feeling that you're a good classroom teacher to feeling you have something to offer more broadly and to support other teachers, whether that's novice teachers, whether that's experienced teachers. And my own journey was really twofold. I think one of my beliefs is that, right from the second, third year of your career, once you start supporting other teachers in the staff room, new teachers coming into your organization, whether that's about systems or how things work in that building, or whether that's good activities that work or principles that you believe in, or opening your door to peer observation, you're already a teacher trainer, supporting other teachers in your organization, or supporting other teachers online with ideas and resources. That's part of teacher training, and that kind of mentoring and supporting and coaching part of teacher training is, I think, fundamental to what being a good teacher trainer is all about. So I really started that shortly after I'd done my Delta. I was at British Council in Thailand, completed my Delta course, and the next year there was a nice system in place where you supported the next year's candidates going for the Delta as an informal mentor. And so that was really, I was very successful in the Delta, and it fitted for me. It fitted the stage of my career, and I think I understood after quite a rapid fall to earth in my first observed Delta lesson. A year later, 2 years later, I was ready to support other teachers coming onto that. So that was my first introduction to it, and I was there for another couple of years. And then I moved to the Instituto Chileno Británico in Santiago, in Chile. And there it was slightly different because I was teaching language to trainee teachers who were going to go into either primary or secondary education in Chile. So that was a degree program run for Chileans who wanted to get their undergraduate degree in pedagogy and in English teaching. And so, although I was teaching language, I was teaching trainee teachers. So there was that kind of overlap of the experiential learning of doing activities to learn the language, but also being able to talk about why we were doing them in that way and how we were reflecting on them and how they could potentially use those activities in their own setting, or which activities wouldn't be suitable for this setting, or how you'd adapt them. So although when I arrived at NILE, which was really a teacher development institute as its main aim, that there's a certain sense of imposter syndrome, I think, when you get into any new career space, when you're the novice and you're surrounded by so much experience and expertise. That was when I then was more formally involved in teacher training and became a CELTA trainer, became a Delta assessor, and started running my own programs, really based around teaching teachers about testing and assessment, which is my academic background. So yeah, I think there's three prongs really. Being a mentor and a supporter of new teachers or in-service development teachers, then teaching teachers language and supporting them with the methodology that goes behind that, the way I was teaching, and then the more formal step into NILE and the accredited programs and the courses and the validated courses, and becoming a recognized teacher trainer in terms of qualifications.
Interesting. That's a massive journey. I think we've compressed many years into 2 or 3 minutes there. Now, I imagine along the way there must have been some bumps, some difficulties that you faced, or some specific challenges with the training context. Are there any that spring to mind?
Yeah, I think there is that necessary recognition of, this is the way that I teach, this is the way that I teach language, and these are my beliefs about teaching. And then that jump from, well, there are many other ways to do this, and there are many other ways that would be appropriate for someone else who's not me and who doesn't have the same beliefs, to do exactly the same kind of language teaching equally effectively, more effectively, in their own style. And so kind of that understanding that you can't just train teachers to teach the way you would teach. You need to open up opportunities, you need to evaluate, you need to encourage reflective practice on people and develop people's own confidence and competence to do things their way. That was a challenge for me to overcome. As a confident language teacher with 5, 6, 7, 8 years experience, kind of thinking, well, I know the way that works for me. And that's contextually specific. I taught by that time in the UK, in Portugal, in Australia, and now then in Thailand, and then I was in Chile. So I had some contextual background, but I was never a young learner specialist. I'd never worked in the EAP field. And so kind of broadening that out and understanding, there are many different approaches which are both personal for a teacher trainer, but also context specific for the students you're working with. That was a big challenge to kind of broaden my own idea of what teacher training needs to encompass.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that. I would consider myself a very, very junior teacher trainer. So I've only been in terms of a formal teacher training position for about 3 years. And I work for Cambridge University Press, Cambridge Assessment, delivering workshops and stuff. But in terms of like the in-service teacher training, one of the things that I find difficult, like you said, is I have all of these ideas and my principles and the things that I know, looking at research and experience and things like that. One of the things that I find actually difficult is when I'm working with, for example, new teachers to the industry, even that are experienced, is having them actually understand their principles, so that that maybe I can try to lead them to something that's perhaps more effective. But it's also that idea of we have to put ourselves in their shoes and see from their perspective. I find that difficult sometimes as well, especially giving feedback, because they have their perspective of how the lesson went, and I have my perspective, and it's trying to bring these together that doesn't end up in sort of a degenerative I don't know, dialogue, and it becomes effective. So that I suppose mirroring what you said there, that's difficult for me as well. And I imagine it's going to be difficult for a long time.
Yeah, I think you're touching on a really important aspect of what being a teacher trainer is all about. That empathetic side to understanding how your words of hopefully constructive criticism and feedback and praise will be received, and how you're maybe changing people's principles, but are you really changing their beliefs? Are you changing their underpinning values? And should you be? If those are firmly held, one of my colleagues used to say, the best way is to have strong opinions loosely held. So know what you believe in, but be ready and open to hear other views and to change and to adapt. And I think that kind of mindset is really important. If we're working with pre-service teachers, you'll have that whole spectrum of people who have never stood up in front of a class of learners before, right. And right through to other people on a course who may have been teaching in mainstream education for 20 years and have very strong beliefs about education practice and education principles. And there is a certain sense in some courses that there's a way to do things. There's a box to tick and there's a hoop to jump through to show that you are deserving of that lesson mark or that qualification at the end. But when you get into kind of in-service teach development, it's so much broader than that, and there's so many different contexts and different approaches to take into account, and they're constantly being challenged by the research and things that are deeply held values in our profession being challenged, perhaps being overturned, being revisited, waves and trends, and it's fascinating. It's a very dynamic profession that we work in.
Yeah, and I think now that's probably the importance of in-service development courses, is really to help teachers see that there's so many things that they can look to, right, and try and not challenge their beliefs, but at least put them up there and say, are these beliefs right for my teaching context? No, I really like what you said about having strongly held but strong beliefs but loosely held. That's really interesting. So that's we focus on some challenges with being a trainer of perhaps teachers. As you moved into training perhaps trainers, is the dynamic quite different, and are there any specific challenges that are relevant to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think you need a deeper breadth and depth of understanding of the theory behind teacher education, and to kind of be able to call on the research and the theoretical models to introduce to people, because as I said, it grows in a kind of a funnel of the context and the appropriacy of your decisions and your approaches and your training sessions and your workshops need to cover more and more context the broader you get. So if you're training trainers, they may be training teachers in completely diverse contexts from which you have personal experience in, and you need to be able to facilitate that without being the imposition of the right way to do things when you don't have that contextual background. So one of the things that I think is interesting to look at is the Cambridge English Trainer Framework, which we worked on at NILE with Cambridge a number of years ago, that really tries to identify the difference between that from teacher to trainer stage to being a lead trainer to being a master trainer, in which case you're responsible for the training of others, and understanding the principles and the underlying research and the theoretical models which you can bring to learners to teacher trainers attention and focus and reflection and application. Certainly I've been hugely influenced by other colleagues at NILE, people like Rod Belitho and Simon Smith and Brian E. Bevan, who run our trainer development courses here to train trainers of teachers. There's very much an ethos of learning from each other and collaborative approaches. And so, even at that level of training trainers, observing somebody else doing it is one of the most powerful tools you have to develop. And that whole micro training, experiential learning, reflective practice is just as important at the level of training trainers as it is at the level of teaching students.
That's really interesting. I was actually in the pre-conference event, and Bryony was there giving a presentation on the needs of advanced teacher trainers and a survey that she conducted. It was really, really insightful to see what the choices. There was a situation that she said that trainers could take 2 weeks off paid to do whatever they like, and what would they do? And most said, something to do with development. They'd go and learn something, but then a number said, I'd relax. I need that time to stress, to relax. It was really interesting, her research. I'm doing a terrible job at summarizing her 45-minute or whatever, 20-minute talk or whatever it was, but it was really, really interesting, really, really interesting.
Yeah, I think that is a really important thing to remember in terms of professional development. I was correcting something yesterday where the CPD had been put as continuous professional development. And I said, well, for me, it's not continuous professional development, it's continuing professional development. And that's what the C stands for. And you can't have all innovation with no consolidation. In so many contexts, there's this professional development urge and impetus that you must be developing constantly, and you must be doing something new and developing a new skill or a new competence all the time. And you've got to give time for that to seep into your day-to-day practice and to be part and to evaluate whether it is valuable for you and whether it's worth holding on to. And so, all in innovation with no consolidation, I think leads to a very frazzled, burnt out, developing teacher.
Yeah, I completely agree. In the PC, I asked Penny if, looking at in-service training programs, for each term, for example, in my academy, we have 3 terms, and we have for this year, I created modules basically. So for each term, we looked at maybe a specific theme for the 4 workshops that we did. And then our mentoring sessions and other development tools were focused kind of on developing teachers around that and their choices around that. And Penny had a different approach. She said, perhaps not looking at depth, but rather breadth of topics in the development program. I thought that was quite interesting. There are quite different perspectives. I'd like to know your perspective on an in-service development program. Would you, for the workshops throughout the year, would you link them by themes or in groups, or would you have, all of them quite different in theme?
Yeah, God, I'd have to know more about your context and the teachers you're working with and the aims of the
It's a difficult question. I apologize.
I think it depends on what's driving it, really. If it's a kind of bottom-up in-service development program where teachers have the opportunity to input their own activities, their own requirements and expectations and aims and what they want to get out of that in-service development, that can be a very sound model, and it can come from their own needs. One of my colleagues, Tom Sarney, ran a study and wrote up the research about observation-led in-service development. So all of the in-service development activities coming from observation of classes and teachers selecting their own areas of need, want, ambition to feed into that. It may be that you're in a context where the in-service development is driven by fundamental need. Let's say, for example, the last 15 months and the pressures in some institutions to focus the development on online learning, or in other settings on hybrid learning. This for me is an incredible challenge on the on the teaching team and on the professional development team to actually bring these competencies in such a short space of time. The move from face-to-face learning to online learning seems to me, even although it's a huge challenge, much more achievable than the move to hybrid learning, where you're trying to do two things at the same time, meeting two groups of students simultaneously, trying to manage that in pedagogical terms, manage it in classroom management terms. So that kind of drive for in-service development may dictate your program. Or you may have a much freer rein, and you maybe bring things in that are of personal interest to you, surveying teachers' interests, looking at specializations that will be valuable to them. I think, without one of those drivers, it's quite difficult to determine from all the wealth of opportunities available where to focus. So yeah, I'd be looking at what's the driver, and how can I know that this is meeting a need rather than just meeting a personal interest.
Exactly, brilliant. That's a good point. I suppose here it's a mixture. For example, first term is generally for us is looking at developing teachers as examiners, because we deal with exams. So developing sort of the assessment literacy amongst teachers, and then from their observations, they get to kind of choose what they would like to work on in the workshops. So I think it's a mixture of both of some of the points that you said in there. Speaking, so it seems clear that you've worked or currently work on pre-service courses, in-service courses, diploma level courses, and also master's level courses. Is there a preference there?
No, but I think I go back to what I said previously. My specialist area really, I guess, is in language teaching methodology and testing and assessment. And so my preference is to work in those areas with teachers at any level. So we have an interesting model with our short face-to-face courses or our 8-week online courses, where we bring together the master's students and the people who are doing it as a standalone course for most of the content and the co-constructed learning, and then have extension activities and tutorials and further reading and research for the master's students. Because the challenges are similar when you get to the day-to-day practice level of what teachers need to be doing in their classes or doing in their educational setting. And so I don't think that distinction that this is master's content, it's not suitable for anybody else, or this is too basic, therefore not worth looking at a master's level. I don't think those distinctions are really valid, because you're addressing the same issues, maybe with different layers of depth, but the issues are quite central. Pre-service, of course, is a different ball game, because you've really got to be careful of the overwhelming nature of how much there is to learn, and the anxiety of being a new teacher and or being a teacher of a new subject. If you come from another teaching background, I think you really need to, as you become a teacher trainer, one of the first things to understand is that the people that you're training don't have the level of understanding or the level of processing of all this information that you may have and that you may have built up. And it takes a long time to develop that understanding of the issues which you may have processed for yourself, but are new to the people you're working with. And we know how intensive in all forms a pre-service CELTA Trinity Cert TESOL course can be. So just stepping back and managing the cognitive and procedural and linguistic demands as you would in your language classes is really important in training in pre-service contexts.
Interesting. I was speaking to Teresa Beswick the other day for my another sponge chat, and she was saying that she works on Cert TESOL courses, also in Dip TESOL courses. With the Cert TESOL, she's sometimes there's so much that we want to impart on pre-service teachers, but the time constraints are just so difficult to work with, and so it's kind of prioritizing, and sometimes it's difficult as someone who knows the stuff that you want to pass on, but you kind of have to cut away a lot of it, I think is what she was referring to, just because of time. It's so, I think my Cert TESOL was 4.5 weeks or something like that.
Yeah, absolutely.
A long time ago. So That was a 4.5 weeks of 12 hours a day, basically, just craziness.
Yeah, I mean, it is hugely intensive, and I think you learn more than you ever thought possible in those 4 weeks. But then you realize when you enter your first job, oh my God, there's so much more to learn, and now it's all about application of this stuff for my new teaching context. And yeah, that was certainly my experience as well. That I thought, goodness me, that was a lot to learn. And then right here's back to square one, and what did that all mean?
Yeah. So you mentioned that you completed your Delta quite some time ago. You also have your MA, it's language teaching assessment, though, from Lancaster University, I think.
Yeah.
Would you see these as, I won't say necessary, but good stepping stones for moving into teacher training?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure that either of them particularly prepared me for teacher training as such, and there has been a dearth of qualifications to prove that you're a teacher trainer. Some of it happens through experience, some of it happens by default, some of it happens by being approved to be a trainer on a particular validated course, like becoming a CELTA trainer, for example. But there isn't a kind of an industry qualification that you say, okay, well, you take this diploma to show your proficiency in language teaching, and then you take this qualification to show your proficiency as a teacher trainer. Part of that was the foundation of the British Council's Professional Award for Teacher Educators. So that course that we also run at NILE, which gives a moderated and validated certificate of being a teacher educator. Part of it is the kind of from teacher to trainer programs. I know Cambridge runs them, we run them at NILE, and then our trainer development programs and module on the masters that really take it that next step into understanding what it means to be a teacher trainer, and what the development of the field has been, and what the research in the field is, so there's a combination of qualifications that you can take. And personally, I feel qualifications are really important. I think they adhere to standards, they're aligned to quality frameworks, they're externally moderated. But not only that, they give you the opportunity to give that focus to a particular topic and the time to dedicate to it, and the support and feedback for it that you don't get if you're just trying to fit things in as part of your daily work. And although that's also great development, I think the time and focus to work on a qualification program is really valuable. And of course, it's valuable for your curriculum vitae, what you can bring to a future employer, or a freelance proposal to say you've got that. And there's no getting away from the fact that many of those requirements are formal requirements, and they are the essentials in an application process. So I do think that they have multiple value.
No, I agree. I think there are, for example, there was some debate about this at the PCE for the Teacher Training Education SIG. There's no real formal qualification to be, a language teacher trainer, but there are certain things that you can do. For example, the MA or the Cambridge train the trainer. And they provide some sort of qualification. There's also that part of experience that needs to come in there as well. But going back to the Delta, in all of the conversations that I've had for Sponge Chats, I think we've all come to the same conclusion as you had there. It doesn't really prepare you to be a trainer, the Delta or the DIPTISO. But what it does do, I think, and it's not to say that the Delta is the only thing that does this, but it makes you very critical of yourself as a teacher. And I kind of think that's necessary to be a good trainer. I'm not sure if that makes sense.
No, absolutely. I completely agree, Jim. It's a process that you need to go through. You can't go through a career without having that personal critical reflection on the way you're teaching, but also having this external feedback on the way you're teaching. And for me, it was a real bucket of cold water. I went into that Delta program very confident in my teaching, and it only took the first observed lesson for me to realize, wow, there's a lot that I don't know here, and that's part of it. You go in knowing I know exactly what to do, but you don't necessarily think, why am I doing this, or whether it's right for other reasons other than it feels good to you and the students are responding well. So I think, that process of understanding the why of language teaching is something that those courses, those diploma level courses, really do give you.
Yeah, I think the metaphor, a bucket of cold water is very accurate. Like you said, your first filter observation, mine as well. I gave an instruction sequence that went on for like 4 minutes, and I filmed it, so I had to watch it, and it was just very cringeworthy. But I use that now as an example in training sessions with teachers. And I especially use it when I'm encouraging teachers to film themselves. And because I find teachers now, at least for this year, teachers at the start of the year were very hesitant to film themselves. But now after having done it a few times, they prefer to be filmed than have me in the class, which I think is good. I think it's a good development. But bucket of cold water.
I think that filming is really, it's a really useful tool. And now the technology is there that we're not kind of bringing in tripods and VHS video cameras as it was back in my early days. The opportunity to watch yourself and to reflect, and it's terrifying. You see things, you think, oh my goodness, did I really do that? And again, my colleague Rob Belitho says, watch it at least a couple of times to get over that shock of what you look like and what you sound like in a classroom, and then you can start unpicking the hot spots, the times when you're quite clearly losing half the class, the times you've turned your back and are speaking to the board, all of these things that just become so visible. And there's a lovely model. It's from the 1960s. I think it's called the four-selves model, and it talks about the hidden self, the blind self. I'm struggling with the others, but it's really, those things that you can see and the observer can see, those things that you can see but the observer can't see, or those things the observer can see but you don't see, and then those things that neither of you are really seeing. You've got no idea what caused the effect, the impact in the classroom. It's not visible to either of you. It's a really nice model to look at, to think about that reflection, and certainly video plays a huge part in that once you get over the initial shock.
Yeah, brilliant. I'm going to take a look at that. I've heard of that before. I think it was actually on the Train the Trainer course. Actually, Simon Smith was on that course as well. So it was really interesting. But I'll definitely take a look at that. See if I can find that.
I think it's Luft. I think Luft.
Very cool. Well, I mean, we've looked at quite a number of things so far. So we've looked at yourself, your involvement in NILE, and many of the other organizations. We've looked at the differences perhaps between training teachers and training trainers, what it takes to become a good trainer, and kind of we looked at what it takes to be a trainer as well. But now let's get to the advice section. You have a teacher that comes to you. They've been teaching for a number of years, and they're saying, well, what's the best way to move into teacher training? Again, I suppose context is important here. If it's in the UK, it's probably quite different to someone who's in a part of the Middle East. But if you had to choose 2 or 3 pieces of advice for teachers that are interested in moving to teacher training, what would they be?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, my first step would be to talk to that teacher and say, well, let's look at the instances in which you're already a teacher trainer. Let's look at the ways in which you're able to support colleagues in your institution, to mentor new teachers, the support you give in the staff room, the informal peer observation programs that you can take part in, because all of these are part of that laying of the foundations of being a teacher trainer. And I think teachers need to understand that is teacher training, that is teacher development, that you are supporting colleagues, and that's a very valuable and valid part of a teacher training or a journey to being a teacher trainer as your kind of main role. I think there is a necessary to consider the specialization aspect of it. is there such a thing as a general teacher trainer? I mean, are you just kind of supporting the language teaching methodology side, or do you want to, do you have the skills, do you have the specialism that's about working with teachers of young learners, or teachers of very young learners, or teachers of displaced populations, or teachers of English for specific purposes? That, you know, these are real different areas of competence for a teacher trainer, and I think understanding that for yourself, and what kind of teacher trainer, where you want to train, where you think you can help, what you have to give, is really important. I would then say, you know, have a look at the course options available to you. Let's say the professional development options, courses being one of those aspects. Also, conference sessions, also becoming involved with the publications of the Teacher Training Education SIG, Teacher Development SIGs at IATEFL and related organisations around the world, and then those informal journal articles, the ELTJ articles, modern English teacher articles, you know, articles that give you an insight into other people's role as teacher trainers, and what you see, how that fits with what you want to do. Part of that might be looking at the Cambridge English Trainer Framework and seeing where you are, where you sit. And then there are those courses like From Teacher to Trainer that we run at NILE, that, you know, gives you that grounding and that understanding and that support with all of the aspects of supporting colleagues, whether that's observing and giving developmental feedback, whether that's planning sessions, whether that's finding out your own beliefs as a teacher trainer and the differences between teaching and training. And then, you know, I think really look at the opportunities for where you're going to be able to train in the future. Is this something that you've seen a particular role that you want to go for and you want to work towards, something like you do, or you know, becoming a freelance trainer, or is it something that you're quite happy to be, you know, incremental and gradual and start doing INSETT sessions for colleagues and start, you know, supporting newer teachers more formally? You know, where is that opportunity for you to be a trainer and to get paid for it?
Brilliant. Yeah, very comprehensive. Thank you for that. I completely agree with all of those. And I suppose I would add the importance of providing opportunities for teachers. You know, this is more for managers. So for example, I only moved into teacher training because I had the opportunity. I wanted to do it, but I was given the opportunity to do it. And I think it's important that we can provide support for teachers in our local context. It's not always easy, I understand, but perhaps I think that's a really important aspect of it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, you know, it should be a win-win situation. If you're a director of studies or an academic manager who's responsible for INSETT programs, professional development, and you've got a teacher who wants to get some experience in running those sessions, it should be absolutely supporting you in your role, but also giving them the support to progress. So I think that's certainly a win-win situation. Definitely,
100% agree. Well, thank you very much for those pieces of advice. Now, the last sort of question or area we have in this is for book recommendations for potential trainers, or any other book recommendations that you have. Is there any that come to mind that you could think about?
Yeah, look, let me push one personal one. 2019, the Routledge. The Routledge Handbook of Language Teacher Education. Tony Prince and I wrote a chapter on digital approaches to teacher education. And that covers so many areas. You know, it's a hefty tome, and but it is worth looking at the particular chapters on different areas there. I would be, you know, totally remiss not to mention the kind of, I think, one of the fundamental books in this field, which is Tony Wright and Rod Bolitho's Trainer Development, which I think you can get on Lulu. And then there's so many others. I'm just thinking of you know, the indicative bibliography from our master's module in training development. So I really like the kind of oldie but goodie psychology for language teachers, Williams and Burden.
Right.
I think, Tessa Woodward's ways of working with teachers is absolutely brilliant for understanding that field. There's Donald Freeman's Educating Second Language Teachers, which I think is great. Kathy Bailey's Language Teacher Supervision. There's so many. I think this is where you start to realize how much there is in the field that you could potentially go into. But yeah, those would be core texts for our programs, and certainly ones that I would direct people to.
Brilliant. Yeah, I've read a number of those. I found Bailey's really, really interesting, quite comprehensive. One that I'm reading at the moment is advising and supporting teachers, and the other one is training foreign language teachers by Wallace. I found
the first one, Randall and Thornton, isn't
exactly.
it? The advising and supporting teacher. And Wallace, absolutely another classic. 30 years old, but still absolutely valid in the points it makes.
Yeah, brilliant, excellent. Well, Thom, you have been absolutely amazing this morning, full of insights and brilliant advice. I am really confident that at least some teachers around the world are going to find this really, really useful. I know I have. And so I'd like to thank you for your time. It's been absolutely amazing.
Thank you, Jim. That's really kind of you. Thank you for the invitation. Lovely to chat to you, get to know you, and great job you're doing with Sponge Chats.
Thank you very much. Okay, and I look forward to seeing each other, maybe perhaps at IATEF or Belfast. We'll see what happens.
Absolutely. Look forward to welcoming you onto the MA as well.
All right. Cheers, Thom. Take care.
Take care, Jim. Cheers. Bye-bye.
Bye.